Welcome to the Paper Crafters Library. In this video I'm going to show you how to cut and emboss your Spellbinders die templates. I'm also going to share with you a whole bunch of different ways that you can use your Spellbinders dies in addition to just the basic cutting and embossing. So cutting with your Spellbinders die templates is very easy, and the process that I'm going to show you here is the process you're going to follow regardless of which Spellbinders die template you're using. Whether it's the regular size, the grand size, whether it's nest abilities, shape abilities, edge abilities, border abilities, the only thing you're not going to use with this sandwich that I'm going to show you are the emboss abilities or impress abilities, because those in fact are for embossing. They're not die cutting templates. So I'm starting with my C plate, which is my cutting plate, and this came with the Spellbinders Grand Caliber, and you can cut on either side, and I typically flip back and forth because I find after a few passes through the machine my plate starts to bow upwards a little bit in the center, so by rotating it the other way it sort of helps keep it as flat as I possibly can. So then the next layer in my sandwich is of course the material that I'm going to die cut. Here I'm just using cardstock. You can use any of the materials that I showed you earlier. The next piece in my sandwich is of course my die. Now when you take a look at your Spellbinders dies, doesn't matter again which of the dies we're talking about, they're all similar. One side you're going to look at is a flat side, completely smooth. When you look at the other side, you're going to see this raised edge. Now this raised edge is the cutting edge. Now if you just run your fingers over it, you're not going to cut yourself, but it's the pressure of this against the cardstock as it goes through the machine or whatever material that's going to cut through that material. So this edge or the raised lip that you see on your die is the side you want to go against your cardstock. So once you have that in place, you could just cover it with your top plate, or generally what I like to do is use some of my Scotch matte finish removable tape. And this is a very low tack tape that simply helps hold my die in place, because I do find sometimes, especially if you have a lot of different dies that you're cutting at the same time, and if your plate is not perfectly flat, like mine's not, then when you put it through your machine, sometimes the dies, or as you're carrying it, sometimes the dies can slip off the cardstock. So this makes sure your die stays directly on top of your material. Then the next plate that you want to finish your sandwich off with is the base plate, which is also called the A plate. And you just lay that directly on top of that sandwich, and you take this whole thing and you run it through the Grand Caliber. Now I'm not going to demonstrate that process simply because we do have a separate video in Paper Crafters Library on the Grand Caliber, which gives you step-by-step visuals on how this is actually put through the machine. So once you've run your die through the machine, you can set aside the cutting plate because you don't need that anymore. Here now you see I have my base plate, and now I have the cutting edge of my die facing upwards. So to emboss, you're going to take what's called your embossing mat, and this is a tan color and it's quite flexible, and you lay that on top, and then you're going to take a pink plate called the B embossing plate, place that on top to create your new sandwich. There you can see it from the top, and then you run this through the Grand Caliber. So now when you remove your embossing plate and your tan embossing mat, and then you remove your die cut shape from your template and cardstock, you can see that you have this gorgeous, not just a very clean cut die cut piece, but you have this gorgeous embossed edge going all around your image. Now if you're working with dies that have more intricate edges, or let's say the whole die is a very intricate piece, then a quick tip for you is to use wax paper as an extra layer in between your cardstock and your die. So for example, if I wanted to cut this fleur de lis square frame out of this green cardstock, let's just move this out of the way, I would put my green cardstock, my wax paper, then I would put my intricate die shape face down on top of the wax paper, and then the wax paper just makes it so much easier for you to pop your die cut shape out of your die template. And then here's an example of how you can use your die cut shape as a focal point or as an element on one of your projects. So besides using an individual shape as a focal point element on your card, you can also layer the shape to create mats, like you can see in this snowman card, or you can see in this card here. And in this one, we've actually layered this label die. It was the regular nestability along with the grand nestabilities. So you can mix and match in between sets as well, as you can see here. Now the other thing you can do is combine the different sizes of the dies to create frames. So for example, here I have two of my circle shapes. This is from my Standard Circles Large, and it's the largest and next size down. So I'm just layering one within the other and then using some adhesive to stick it down. Or you can mix and match shapes. So for example, here I have a frame that comes from my Labels 10, and then here I'm going to place an oval inside, and this comes from my classic oval small. And I'm just going to use some tape to secure that in place. I'm going to run this through my grand caliber and I'll show you what it looks like. So here you can see I have this circular frame, or here's an example of what my frame looks like with the two shapes that were layered one on top of the other. So that's another fun way that you can use your nestabilities. So now here's an example of a project in which I created some frames using my rectangular and scalloped rectangular nestabilities along with the square and scalloped square nestabilities, and I've used them to frame my photos on a scrapbook page. Now you can also use your nestabilities and grand nestabilities to create shaped cards, and there's a couple of different ways that you can do this. For example, with this card here, I used my grand scalloped ovals and cut out two ovals, and then on one of the ovals scored probably about 1.5 inches or 1.75 inches down from the top edge, and then stuck that to the first oval to create this oval shaped Easter card. Now the other way that you can create shaped cards, here I've got a piece of cardstock that's been folded in half, and then here I've got the smallest die from my Grand Labels 4. And as long as a portion of the folded edge is sitting inside the frame of the die, then you're going to get a shaped card. And I'll just show you this. I'm going to run this through my grand caliber and I'll be right back. So here I'm back from my grand caliber, and I'm just going to remove this from the die. Just remove my tape, and then here you can see I have a shaped card. Isn't that cool? Now the only difference essentially between creating a shaped card this way and creating a shaped card this way is that when you just stick the two pieces together and essentially create almost like a hinge, then you get the full nestability shape. When you do it this way, one of your edges is always going to be a little bit flat. Now it's very easy to use your nestabilities to create windows in your cards. So here, for example, I have a square card that I've created, and I want to cut a circular window in the opening. Now the only thing you want to make sure is that you don't cut through both layers, otherwise you're just going to have a circle going through both the front and back of your card. So you just open up your card, you place your die where you want your window to be positioned. This is where having your tape comes in handy, because you secure that in place so it doesn't slide from its position, and then you run that through your die cutting machine. So then when you remove your die from the front of your card, you can see you now have this awesome window in the front of your card. And I showed you earlier how to create frames using your nestabilities. You could very easily then create a decorative frame to go around the outside of this window. Now here's an example of another, almost like a window, I guess you could say, kind of like a shadow box effect that I created on the front of this card. I die cut my die out of my cardstock piece, and then I popped it up on my card front and recessed the die itself. So there you can see that's another way to use this window effect. So another use is to create pockets. So for example, here I'm taking one of my Spellbinders shapes. I think this one's called long rectangles, I'm not sure. And I'm going to put it on a piece of pattern paper. I'm going to run this through my grand caliber. And then here you can see, so I'm just removing it from the die, and if I take my piece and I just fold it in half, And then if I were to just stick the edges together, I could have this cute little pocket that I could use in the front of my card, and I could stick a tag inside this pocket. So that gives you a good overview of a whole bunch of ways that you can use your nestabilities and grand nestabilities to die cut and emboss. In the next video, I'm going to show you how you can use them as stencils.